The orange juice caught the sunlight as she handed it to me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You've done so well for yourself," my mother said, studying my face with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Something ancient stirred in my memory, a childhood fever, that same look watching over me, a spoon of medicine that tasted wrong. They always say trust your instincts. So when she turned to greet my sister, I switched our glasses with the quiet precision of someone who'd always known this day would come. 30 minutes later, when she stumbled toward the bathroom, pale and disoriented, I finally understood the truth. The woman who gave me life had been planning my death for years. And she'd almost succeeded once before. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The call came on a Tuesday. Mom's voice, sweet as syrup, but with that familiar undercurrent I'd spent years in therapy trying to identify. "Darling, we simply must celebrate your success. Just a small family brunch. Nothing extravagant." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, staring at the patent approval letter on my desk. The tech innovation that had just made me financially independent, something I'd purposely kept quiet about in family circles. Yet somehow she knew. "How did you hear about the patent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. A pause, just a heartbeat too long. "Oh, Marnie mentioned it. You know how she keeps up with industry news." Marnie, my half-sister, who had blocked me on all social media 3 years ago after our last explosive Thanksgiving. The sister who had once whispered, "Mom always liked me better because I don't ask questions." That Marnie was suddenly tracking my career achievements? "Right," I said. "When were you thinking?" "This weekend would be perfect. Everyone's available." Everyone. The word hung in the air like a threat. I hadn't been home in 4 years, not since Dad's funeral. Not since Mom had clutched my arm at the reception and hissed, "He never loved you like he loved me. Remember that." "I'll check my calendar," I replied. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the rain pattering against my apartment window. Going back felt wrong. Staying away felt worse. 4 years of building a life 3,000 miles away from Oakwood Avenue hadn't been enough. The invisible thread still tugged. I booked the flight that night. The house looked exactly the same and completely different all at once. The white colonial with black shutters still stood proudly on its corner lot, surrounded by the meticulously maintained garden that had been Dad's pride and joy. But something felt off, like seeing a familiar face with a new scar. Mom, Celeste, as she preferred to be called since turning 60, opened the door before I could knock. Her blonde hair was freshly highlighted, her smile Botoxed into perfect symmetry. "There she is, our little genius." She pulled me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and something medicinal underneath.
"Come in, come in."
"Everyone's waiting." I followed her through the foyer, noticing the family photos had been rearranged. More of Marnie and her husband Royce. Fewer of Dad. None of me past age 16. "We've kept your room exactly as you left it," Mom said, leading me upstairs. Then she stopped abruptly at my old bedroom door. A shiny new deadbolt gleamed on the outside. "Oh, except we're using it for storage now. You'll stay in the guest room." She didn't offer to open it. The guest room was impersonal and spotless, a hotel room in my childhood home. I placed my suitcase on the bed and glanced out the window to the backyard. Dad's garden had been replaced with a swimming pool. "When did that happen?" I asked, gesturing outside. "Oh, shortly after. Well, after everything. A new beginning." She smiled tightly. "Freshen up and come down. Brunch is almost ready." As she closed the door, I noticed a slight tremor in her right hand. The same tremor Dad had developed in the months before his heart failure. The dining room was set with a good china, the set reserved for Christmas and funerals. Marnie sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. At 32, 2 years my junior, she'd grown to look more like Mom. All angles and highlights. She barely looked up when I entered. "Hey," she said flatly. "Hello, Marnie." Royce stood by the window, nursing a whiskey despite it being barely 11 in the morning. He'd aged since I'd seen him last, more gray at his temples, deeper lines around his mouth. When our eyes met, his expression shifted from boredom to something I couldn't quite read. Wariness, maybe. Or guilt. Rachel, good to see you. He didn't move to hug me. You too, Royce. Mom bustled in from the kitchen carrying a tray of pastries. Let's eat on the patio. It's such a beautiful day. The patio furniture was new too, sleek and modern, nothing like the weathered wooden set Dad had built. We sat in awkward silence as Mom disappeared back into the kitchen. So, Marnie finally looked up. Big shot patent holder now, huh? It's just a software security protocol, I said, deliberately downplaying it. Just a multi-million-dollar security protocol, she corrected, a familiar edge in her voice. Always the overachiever. Before I could respond, Mom returned with a pitcher of orange juice. Fresh squeezed. A special recipe. She poured 4 glasses, but handed mine to me separately. Here's to success, sweetheart. I froze. In 28 years, my mother had never called me sweetheart. It had always been Rachel or young lady when I was in trouble. I studied her face as she raised her glass. The smile didn't reach her eyes. To success, everyone echoed. I raised the glass to my lips, but didn't drink. Something primal, some deep-buried instinct, stirred in my chest. I pretended to take a sip, then set the glass down. Before we toast, I need to know something, I said. The real reason for this gathering. Mom's smile flickered. Whatever do you mean? Dad's estate. Royce cut in, surprising everyone. We need to discuss the codicil. The tension at the table crystallized. Mom shot Royce a look that could curdle milk. Codicil? I repeated. Marnie sighed dramatically. The addition to Dad's will. It only activates if you accept the offer. What offer? We were getting to that, Mom said tightly. Drink your juice first. It's getting warm. I glanced at my untouched glass, then at her eager expression. A childhood memory surfaced. Mom insisting I drink a special tea when I was 14. I'd been sick for 3 days afterward. Actually, I need to use the restroom first, I said, standing abruptly. As I passed behind Mom's chair, I fake sneezed loudly. In the momentary distraction, I switched our glasses. The movement was quick, instinctive, like my hands remembered something my mind had tried to forget. When I returned, Mom was checking her watch impatiently. Finally. Now let's toast properly. We raised our glasses again. This time, I watched her drink from what had been my glass. I pretended to sip from hers. The conversation turned to safe topics, neighborhood gossip, Marnie's new job at the hospital administration, the weather. 30 minutes later, Mom pressed a hand to her temple. Excuse me, she murmured, rising unsteadily. Just need a moment. As she disappeared inside, Royce and Marnie exchanged a look. What's going on? I demanded. Nothing, Marnie said too quickly. Mom's been having migraines lately. I left the table and followed Mom's path to the downstairs bathroom. The door was closed, but I could hear retching on the other side. Instead of knocking, I slipped into the adjacent powder room and opened the medicine cabinet. The prescription bottles were hidden behind the hand towels. Metoprolol, digoxin, furosemide, heart medications. One bottle caught my eye, a prescription for Xanax. The patient name on the label was Rachel Woodward. My name. I never received this prescription. Never authorized it. I heard the toilet flush in the other bathroom. Quickly, I took photos of all the bottles, then closed the cabinet. Back in the hallway, Mom emerged looking pale. Just a little dizzy spell, she said weakly. Nothing to worry about. That night, I couldn't sleep. The locked bedroom, the medications, the switched drink, it all swirled in my mind. Around midnight, I heard voices from the attic directly above the guest room. I crept to the air vent near the ceiling and listened. We should have told her, Marnie's voice hissed. Celeste went too far today. And say what exactly? Royce responded. Hey, your mom might be trying to kill you like she did your dad? You think she'd believe that? My blood ran cold. She's smarter than you think, Marnie said. She didn't drink the juice. A pause. You noticed that too? Of course I did. And so did Mom. I backed away from the vent, heart hammering. Before sunrise, I'd placed a small recording device in the hallway, hidden behind a decorative sconce. Whatever game they were playing, I needed evidence. Something told me I didn't have much time. The next morning, while everyone was still asleep, I crept up to the attic. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight, each sound a gunshot in the silent house. The attic was cluttered with furniture and boxes, the physical archive of a family's secrets. In the far corner, behind an old dresser, I found what I was looking for: Dad's old steamer trunk. The lock was flimsy, easily picked with a hairpin from my pocket. Inside, beneath layers of old sweaters and college memorabilia, lay a stack of leather-bound journals. I grabbed the most recent one, dated the year before his death. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. April 18th. Celeste added something to my coffee again this morning. The metallic taste is unmistakable now. My hands won't stop shaking. Dr. Pearson says it's stress, but he's been her friend for 20 years. Would he even tell me the truth? May 30th. The symptoms are getting worse. Palpitations, confusion, nausea. I've been secretly seeing Dr. Kaplan in the city. Blood tests show elevated levels of digoxin. I've never been prescribed digoxin. June 15th. I've changed my will today. Rachel must be protected. I fear for her most of all. Celeste has always been jealous of our bond. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. If something happens to me, the truth is in the garden. Under the white roses. Rachel will know where to look. I closed the journal, ball rising in my throat. All these years, I'd believed the official story. Sudden cardiac arrest, a genetic weakness, unavoidable. Now, the truth crashed over me like a wave. My father had been murdered, and I might be next. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, clutching the journal to my chest. Royce stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Find what you were looking for? How long have you known? I asked, not bothering to hide the journal. He sighed, stepping into the attic and closing the door behind him. Suspected for years. Known for sure? Since I found your dad's hidden blood test results after he died. And you did nothing? What could I do? The autopsy was rushed, cremation was immediate, and suddenly Celeste had power of attorney over everything. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I tried telling Marnie, but she wouldn't believe me. Not at first. And now she's terrified. Of your mother, of what happens next. Of being implicated. I stuffed the journal into my sweater. Why is Mom doing this now? After all these years. The codicil, Royce said. It activates on her 65th birthday, next month. If you're alive when she turns 65, control of the estate transfers to you. All of it. How much are we talking about? With the properties, investments, and insurance payouts? About $30 million. The amount stunned me. Dad had been successful, but I'd had no idea. There's more, Royce added. Your mother faked a terminal diagnosis 7 years ago. Used it to solicit donations from your father's business associates for an experimental treatment. That's fraud. That's just the beginning. He glanced nervously at the door. We should go down. She'll be up soon. The breakfast table that morning was a masterpiece of deception. Mom, seemingly recovered from yesterday's migraine, bustled around the kitchen making pancakes as if nothing had happened. Did you sleep well, Rachel? She asked, placing a steaming mug in front of me. I made you some herbal tea. My special blend. I smiled tightly. I'm more of a coffee person these days. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Since when? People change, Mom. She watched me throughout breakfast, her gaze calculating. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, or perhaps more accurately, like prey being sized up by a predator. After breakfast, I excused myself to make a phone call. In the privacy of the garden, what used to be Dad's sanctuary, I contacted his former therapist, Dr. Lambert. Rachel Woodward, I said when she answered. Lewis Woodward's daughter. A pause. I wondered if you'd ever call. I need to know what my father told you. About my mother. The therapist sighed heavily. Patient confidentiality. He's dead. I cut in. And I think she killed him. And now she's coming for me. Another long pause. Your father feared for you most of all, Rachel. He said if anything happened to him, you should never return to that house. Too late for that warning. Did he ever explicitly say she was poisoning him? He couldn't bring himself to say it outright, but he brought me his lab results. The digoxin levels were consistent with long-term exposure. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to weaken his heart over time. Thank you, I whispered, ending the call. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed a patch of white roses in the corner of the yard, the only part of Dad's garden that remained untouched. The truth is in the garden. Under the white roses. I would have to find a way to dig there, unnoticed. That evening, Marnie found me alone in the library. She closed the door softly behind her. We need to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I put down the book I'd been pretending to read. About how our mother murdered our father. Or about how she's trying to do the same to me. Marnie flinched. I didn't want to believe it. Even when Royce showed me Dad's journals. Even when the symptoms matched exactly. When did you figure it out? She sank into a chair opposite me, suddenly looking much younger, more vulnerable. Last year. I found a vial in her bathroom. Unmarked. I had it tested at the hospital, digoxin, concentrated. The same substance that would have caused Dad's symptoms. Why didn't you go to the police? With what proof? The vial disappeared the next day. And then, her voice broke. She started being so nice to me, putting me in the will, telling me I was the real heir. You were always the real heir, Rachel. She hated that. Dad loved you best. This isn't about love, Marnie. It's about money. It's about both, she insisted. You were always his favorite. The smart one, the one who looked like him. I was just the replacement daughter. I shook my head. Dad loved us both. Maybe. But you were the one who got 80% in his original will. This was news to me. What original will? Marnie's eyes widened. You don't know about the first will? The one he made before he died? Mom had it invalidated somehow, claimed he wasn't of sound mind. The next morning, while Mom was at her weekly hair appointment, I searched Dad's old study. The room had been transformed into a home gym, but the built-in bookshelves remained. Behind a row of unused dumbbells, I found a hidden panel. Inside was a manila envelope containing a draft of Dad's original will, dated 2 weeks before his death. As Marnie had said, it left the bulk of the estate to me, but with a crucial condition. I would only inherit if I was alive after Celeste's 65th birthday. Dad had known. He'd tried to protect me from beyond the grave. Also in the envelope was a thumb drive. I slipped it into my pocket just as the front door opened downstairs. Hello. A male voice called out. Not Royce. I cautiously descended the stairs to find a tall, gray-haired man in an expensive suit standing in the foyer. Rachel Woodward, he asked, extending his hand. Elliot Brennan. I was your father's attorney. Not the family attorney, I clarified, remembering the name from Dad's journals. No, your father's personal counsel. Is your mother home? She's out. Relief crossed his face. Good. I've been trying to reach you for years. Your father left something for you. He handed me a sealed envelope. He made me promise to deliver it personally if you ever return to this house. I accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Why wait until now? I've been watching, waiting for the right moment. Your mother has been vigilant. He glanced nervously at his watch. I should go before she returns. But Rachel, be careful. Very careful. After he left, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my father's handwriting. Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've returned home despite my warnings. You always were too brave for your own good. Celeste is not who you think she is. The woman I married disappeared years ago, replaced by someone consumed by greed and resentment. I've documented everything, but couldn't go public. She threatened to hurt you if I did. Trust no one except Elliot. Check the garden. Under the white roses lies the final proof. I love you. Forgive me for not protecting you better.
Dad.
I carefully refolded the letter, my resolve hardening. That night, I would check the roses. The knock on my door came after midnight. I opened it cautiously to find Royce standing there, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he whispered. "Not here." I followed him to the garage, where he immediately closed the door and checked for hidden devices. "I've been watching Celeste for years," he said, voice low. "Gathering evidence. I was too scared to act alone. But now that you're here, why should I trust you?" I asked. "Because I have this." He pulled out a small flash drive. "Hidden camera footage from your father's study, the week before he died. Celeste adding something to his heart medication. I installed it after he confided in me." "And you didn't save him?" My voice rose despite myself. "I found the footage after, when I was checking the security system. By then it was too late." Genuine pain crossed his features. "I loved your father. He was the only real family I had." I studied his face, looking for deception. Finding none, I nodded slowly. "Show me." Back in my room, we reviewed the footage on my laptop. There she was, my mother, carefully opening Dad's pill container, adding a fine powder to each compartment. Her face was calm, methodical, the face of someone who had done this many times before. "I'll testify," Royce said, "if you go to the police." "Not yet," I decided. "First, I need what's under the roses." Later that night, I checked the recording device I'd hidden in the hallway. What I heard chilled me to the bone. Mom in my room while I was out, rummaging through my suitcase, the distinctive sound of pills being crushed. The game had changed. This wasn't just about preventing me from inheriting anymore. This was about eliminating me entirely. I had a choice to make. Go to the police now with what I had, or play along a little longer and uncover the full conspiracy. I chose the latter. Sometimes, to catch a predator, you have to become prey. The next morning, I stumbled into the kitchen with calculated clumsiness. My movements were sluggish, my speech slightly slurred. Mom watched with barely concealed satisfaction as I fumbled with the coffee pot. "Not feeling well, dear?" she asked, voice dripping with false concern. "Just tired," I mumbled. "Dizzy." Her smile widened a fraction. "Perhaps you should sit down. Let me get you some water." I caught Marnie's horrified expression before she quickly masked it. She knew what was happening but said nothing. Over the next 2 days, I continued the charade, growing progressively weaker, complaining of headaches and nausea. Each symptom I mentioned seemed to please Mom more. She hovered constantly, offering food and drinks I politely declined or only pretended to consume. On the 3rd day, she announced a formal family dinner. "To properly celebrate your accomplishments," she said, patting my hand, "I'm making your favorite beef Wellington." "You don't have to go to the trouble," I protested weakly. "Nonsense. It's the least I can do for my successful daughter." That evening, dressed in a black cocktail dress that had belonged to my mother in her younger years, a calculated choice, I joined the family at the dining table. The scene was surreal: candles, fine china, crystal glasses. A celebration or a funeral feast. The beef Wellington arrived, beautifully presented. Mom served me the first slice personally. "Eat up," she encouraged. "You need your strength." I took small bites, secretly depositing most of the food into a napkin on my lap when no one was looking. Later, I would bag it for testing. Midway through dinner, the doorbell rang. Mom frowned. We weren't expecting anyone. Royce went to answer it. He returned with Elliot Brennan, who nodded almost imperceptibly at me. "Elliot," Mom said coldly. "What an unexpected surprise." "Forgive the intrusion, Celeste," he replied smoothly. "I was passing by and remembered I had some paperwork for Rachel regarding her patent filing. It couldn't wait until business hours?" "International timelines," he explained vaguely. "May I borrow her for just a moment?" In the study, Elliot handed me a thumb drive. "Voice memos and surveillance from your father's final days," he whispered. "And something else you should know. Your mother was having an affair with Dr. Pearson, the family doctor who signed your father's death certificate." "He falsified medical records?" "Almost certainly. There was never a proper autopsy." I pocketed the drive. "Thank you, Elliot." You've risked a lot. Your father saved my life, once, literally. Heart attack on the golf course. I owe him everything. His eyes hardened. When are you going to the police?
Soon.
I need one more piece of evidence. Whatever's under those white roses. Back at dinner, Mom was visibly agitated by Elliot's appearance. She poured wine generously, especially into my glass. I pretended to sip while watching her grow, increasingly frustrated. Later that night, I sent the food sample to a contact at a private lab, a college friend who owed me a favor. The results came back within 24 hours. Traces of digoxin detected, enough to induce cardiac symptoms in a healthy adult. I'll wear the wire, Royce said the next afternoon. We were in the garden, pretending to admire the pool while actually speaking in hushed tones. If I can get her to admit what she did to your father, that's the smoking gun you need. It's risky, I warned. If she suspects anything, she trusts me. Or at least, she thinks she does. His jaw tightened. I've played the loyal son-in-law for years. She has no reason to doubt me now. That evening, Royce wore a small recording device under his shirt as he joined Mom for their regular evening cocktail on the patio. I listened from my room, headphones allowing me to hear the conversation in real time. Celeste, Royce began carefully, I'm worried about Rachel. She seems unwell. A pause. Ice cubes clinking in a glass. Yes, poor thing. Must be the stress of her big project. Is that what it is? Just stress. What else would it be? Her tone sharpened slightly. I don't know. It reminds me of Lewis, toward the end. Another pause, longer this time. Don't be ridiculous. Lewis had a heart condition. A condition that appeared rather suddenly, as I recall. What exactly are you implying, Royce? Nothing. Just, history has a way of repeating itself. Indeed it does. Her voice had turned to ice. People make the same mistakes. Trust the wrong people. Speak when they should remain silent. The threat was unmistakable. Shortly after, Royce ended the conversation and left the patio. During my search of a house the next day, I discovered a manila folder hidden in Mom's closet. Inside were birth and death certificates for someone named Elizabeth Woodward, dated 30 years ago. A baby who had lived only 6 months. My father's name was listed as the father. I had an older sister. One who had died mysteriously as an infant. One no one had ever mentioned. When I searched public records, I found no official death certificate had ever been filed. What happened to baby Elizabeth? And why had this been kept secret all these years? Before I could dig deeper, I heard Mom calling for me. I quickly replaced the folder and went downstairs. She was standing in the kitchen, holding a glass of orange juice. The same juice from my first morning home. I saved your glass, she said calmly. From the other day. You barely touched it. I froze. Oh, I had it tested, you know. She placed the glass on the counter between us. At Pearson's lab. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Tested for what? Contaminants. She smiled coldly. You switched our glasses, Rachel. I know you did. The accusation hung in the air between us. I decided to change tactics. Why are you trying to poison me, Mom? Her eyes widened fractionally, surprised not by the accusation, but by my directness. That's absurd, she replied, but her denial lacked conviction. Is it? Like you poisoned Dad. Your father died of heart failure. After months of you slowly poisoning him with digoxin. The same thing you're trying to do to me. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said something that confirmed everything. If I wanted you dead, you'd be in the ground like your father. The confession was right there. I had it on my phone, recording in my pocket. Why, Mom? Because of the money? The codicil? Her laugh was brittle. You think this is about money? This is about what's rightfully mine. What I built with Lewis before you came along and became his whole world. So you killed him? Your husband. I freed myself, she corrected, and protected what's mine. Lewis was going to leave me with nothing, give it all to you, his precious daughter. She spat the word like a curse, just like he did with her. With who? Elizabeth? The color drained from her face. Where did you hear that name? My sister. The one who died as a baby. Or did she? Mom's hand tightened around her glass. You know nothing. Then tell me, what happened to Elizabeth? Instead of answering, she picked up the orange juice glass, the one she claimed I had switched, and poured it slowly down the sink. We're done here, she said flatly. Pack your things. I want you out of my house by morning. Your house? According to the codicil, it will be mine in 3 weeks, when you turn 65. Her smile was cold enough to freeze blood. We'll see about that. I left the kitchen, my mind racing. I had enough evidence now to go to the police. The recorded confession, the poisoned food sample, Dad's journals, the surveillance footage. But something held me back. Elizabeth, the sister I never knew existed. What had happened to her? And how did that connect to what was happening now? I needed answers before I could go to the authorities. I took the evidence file I'd compiled and drove to the local police station, intending to make a copy and place it in their records, without formally filing charges yet. At the front desk, I requested to speak with a detective. The woman who approached me had intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Detective Sienna Okafor, she introduced herself. How can I help you? I need to document something, I explained carefully. But I'm not ready to file an official report yet. She studied me for a moment. Let's talk in private. In her office, I showed her copies of Dad's journals, the lab results, and played a short clip of Mom's inadvertent confession. Detective Sienna listened without interruption. This is serious, she said finally. Attempted murder, possibly actual murder in your father's case. Why aren't you filing charges? There's more to the story. Something about a sister I never knew I had. I need to understand the whole picture first. She nodded slowly. I can hold this information confidentially for 72 hours. After that, I'm obligated to investigate. That's all I need, I promised. 3 days to find the truth under the white roses. The drive back to the house felt like crossing enemy lines. Detective Sienna's words echoed in my head. Be careful. People who poison others aren't usually rational. 3 days to uncover the final pieces of this twisted family puzzle. 3 days before the police would officially investigate. First, I needed to confront Marnie. She knew more than she was letting on. I found her in the sunroom, mindlessly scrolling through her phone, a half-empty wine glass at her elbow despite it being barely noon. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. About Elizabeth. The phone clattered to the floor. Where did you hear that name? I found her birth certificate. Our sister, the one no one bothered to mention. Marnie's face crumpled. She looked suddenly much younger, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. I only found out myself last year. There was a box in the attic. Old photos, hospital bracelets. What happened to her? According to the paperwork, she died of SIDS.
But
she hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. But what, Marnie? There's no death certificate in the public records. I checked. And Dad's journal mentioned a first daughter, who was taken from him. You think Mom did something to her? I don't know. Maybe. Mom always said Dad loved you best, but what if? She stopped abruptly as the door swung open. Mom stood there, expression pleasant, but eyes cold as winter. What are you two whispering about? Just catching up? I lied smoothly. Marnie was telling me about her job at the hospital. How nice. Her gaze lingered on Marnie's face, noting the tears threatening to spill. Darling, would you help me prepare lunch? I'm hosting a little forgiveness gathering. All of us together, putting the past behind us. Marnie shot me a warning look before following Mom out of the room. I waited until they were gone, then slipped out to the garden. The white roses stood in the far corner, untouched amid the modernized landscape. I knelt beside them, ignoring the mud staining my jeans, and began to dig with a small trowel I'd taken from the garage. 6 inches down, my tool clinked against something metal. A small tin box, rusted at the edges. Inside was a waterproof pouch containing a micro-cassette tape, a tiny recorder, and a note in my father's handwriting. The final proof. May 12th, 2018. 3 days before his death. I pocketed everything and carefully replaced the soil, arranging the roses to hide any evidence of disturbance. Back in my room, I closed the door and inserted the tape into the recorder. My father's voice, weak but determined, filled the room. This will be my final record. Celeste has been poisoning me for months. I've collected samples, documented symptoms, verified with an independent doctor. The digoxin levels in my system are consistent with long-term exposure. I've changed my will to protect Rachel after I'm gone. If anything happens to me, this tape should go directly to the police. A pause, then. There's something else. Something I've never told anyone. Our first daughter, Elizabeth, didn't die of SIDS. I came home early that day and found the tape cut off abruptly. I frantically checked the recorder, but the rest of the tape had been damaged by water or time. The most crucial revelation lost. I was so absorbed in my frustration that I almost missed the sound of someone trying my door handle. It was locked, thankfully. Soft footsteps retreated down the hall. That evening, Mom's forgiveness lunch was set in the formal dining room. The table gleamed with silver and crystal, fresh flowers arranged in the center. Marnie sat stiffly in her chair, while Royce was notably absent. "Where's Royce?" I asked as Mom brought out a platter of roasted chicken. "Called away on business," she replied smoothly. "Such a shame he'll miss our little family reconciliation." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. I texted Royce under the table. "Where are you? Everything okay?" No response. Throughout lunch, Mom waxed nostalgic about family memories, most of which seemed fabricated. She described vacations we never took, traditions we never had. It was as if she was creating an alternate history where we'd been a normal, loving family. "Remember that summer in Cape Cod?" she asked, refilling wine glasses. "When Rachel caught that enormous fish. How proud your father was." We had never been to Cape Cod. Dad had been afraid of the ocean. "And Christmas, when you girls performed that adorable pageant for the neighbors?" No pageant. No neighborhood gatherings. She was building a fiction, a performance. But for whom? Just us? Or was she laying groundwork for something else? Midway through her toast about family bonds that can never be broken, she slipped, mentioning a conversation I'd had privately with Elliot yesterday. Something she couldn't possibly have known unless she'd been listening. The meal ended with Mom suggesting we all stay a few more days. "For family healing," she insisted, her gaze lingering too long on me. There's still so much to discuss about the estate. After lunch, I searched for Royce. His car was gone, his room untouched since morning. His phone went straight to voicemail. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I was examining Dad's study again when I noticed a slight discoloration on one wood panel, newer than the rest. Pressing it revealed a hidden compartment containing a stack of mini cassettes labeled with dates spanning several years and a small recorder identical to the one I'd found in the garden. I played the most recent tape. Dad's voice, stronger than on the garden tape, filled the room. March 2nd, 2018. "Celeste threatened me today. Said if I didn't change the will back, there would be consequences. I fear for Rachel. I've arranged for her to receive a fellowship in London after graduation. The farther from Celeste, the safer she'll be." That explained the unexpected overseas opportunity that had launched my career, the one Mom had tried desperately to dissuade me from taking. Another tape, dated earlier. January 15th, 2018. Dr. Pearson refused to run the tests I requested. Claims my symptoms are age-related. I caught him and Celeste in what appeared to be an intimate conversation at the hospital. I suspect they're involved, possibly conspiring. The oldest tape held the most chilling revelation. June 4th, 1996. I found old hospital records while searching for Elizabeth's birth certificate. There was no autopsy performed. Celeste's brother signed the death certificate. He was a medical examiner then. The official cause was SIDS, but Elizabeth had been perfectly healthy. I'm beginning to suspect something unthinkable. A sudden noise in the hallway made me freeze. I quickly replaced the tapes and closed the panel, heart hammering. Seconds later, Mom appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" she asked, voice dangerously soft. "Just reminiscing. I replied, gesturing to a family photo on the bookshelf. Dad loved this room. Her eyes narrowed, scanning for evidence of my true purpose. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. After she left, I continued searching the house for any sign of Royce. In the garage, I found his cell phone wedged between the seats of Mom's car, screen cracked, battery nearly dead. A half-typed text message glowed on the screen. I knew too much. Get OU dash. The message was never completed. That night, I called Detective Sienna, no longer willing to wait the full 72 hours. Something's happened to my brother-in-law, I explained. And I found recordings of my father discussing the poisoning. I'll be there first thing tomorrow, she promised. Don't confront your mother. Don't let on that you know anything. But the next morning, before Detective Sienna could arrive, I discovered Mom had left early for a spa day with friends. Marnie was gone too, a hasty note on the counter claiming a work emergency. I was alone in the house. The perfect time to search for Royce, or his body. The basement was the obvious place to look. I'd avoided it so far, childhood fears still lingering. The old wooden stairs creaked as I descended, flashlight in hand. The space was surprisingly clean and organized, no cobwebs or dust, just neatly labeled storage boxes and a new chest freezer humming in the corner. The freezer. My stomach lurched. With trembling hands, I approached it, half expecting to find Royce's frozen remains inside. Instead, it contained only normal frozen foods and several unlabeled plastic containers. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by confusion. Where was he? A metallic glint caught my eye. A small key had fallen behind the freezer. I fished it out, examining the unusual shape. Not a door key. Something smaller. Back upstairs, I tried it on the locked storage room, my old bedroom. The key didn't fit. But when I examined the new safe in Dad's office, the key slipped in perfectly. Inside were bank documents for an account in Panama tied to shell companies with millions flowing in and out. The statements revealed regular deposits from a donation fund for Mom's fake terminal illness and withdrawals to offshore accounts under various names. This wasn't just about Dad's estate. Mom had been running a complex fraud operation for years. I was photographing the documents when the front door slammed. Footsteps approached rapidly. I barely had time to close the safe and pocket the key before Marnie burst into the room, her face ashen. "You need to leave," she hissed.
Now.
Mom knows everything. What are you talking about? There was a dead rabbit on my bed this morning. With a note. Family first. It's her warning. To me and to you. She grabbed my arm. She knows you found the tapes. She knows you went to the police. How could she possibly? She has cameras everywhere. Has for years. And Detective Sienna just called the house phone asking for you. Mom answered. My blood ran cold. Where is Mom now? Right here, came a voice from the doorway. Mom stood there, immaculately dressed as always, her smile pleasant. In her hand was a small revolver. Sit down, girls. We need to have a family meeting. The courtroom was silent as I took the stand, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on me. 6 months had passed since that final confrontation at the house, yet the memory remained razor-sharp. Ms. Woodward, the prosecutor began, please tell the court what happened on the afternoon of May 18th. I glanced across the courtroom where Mom, Celeste, sat beside her defense attorney, her expression impassive, almost bored. She wore a conservative navy suit, pearl earrings, the perfect picture of a respectable older woman. Not someone who would poison her husband, attempt to murder her daughter, or hold her own children at gunpoint. My mother had discovered that I'd found evidence of her crimes. I began. She confronted my sister and me in my father's study. She had a revolver. What happened next? She told us to sit down, that we needed to have a family meeting. She was eerily calm, as if holding her daughters at gunpoint was a perfectly normal occurrence. The memory unspooled like film footage. You girls have been very naughty, Mom had said, gesturing with a gun. Digging up the past. Making accusations. It's not an accusation if it's true, I'd replied, trying to position myself between her and Marnie. We know what you did to Dad. To Elizabeth. Her smile had faltered at the mention of Elizabeth. You know nothing about Elizabeth. I know enough. Dad suspected you did something to her. That's in his tapes. Lewis was confused at the end. Paranoid. Because you were poisoning him, Marnie had interjected, finding her courage. Just like you tried to poison Rachel. Such imagination. Mom had sighed dramatically. This is why we're going to have a nice family meeting. To clear everything up. But first. The sound of shattering glass had interrupted her. Someone breaking in through the kitchen window. Mom had swung around, momentarily distracted. I'd lunged for the gun, and in the struggle, it had gone off. The bullet hit the ceiling. I continued in the courtroom. Detective Sienna and 2 officers came running in. They'd heard everything through the open phone line. And what happened to your brother-in-law, Royce Bennett? He was found later that day, at the bottom of a ravine about 3 miles from our house. He'd been beaten and left for dead, but survived. Mom's lawyer objected, claiming speculation about who had harmed Royce. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. The jury had heard. During the confrontation, did your mother say anything about poisoning your father?
Yes.
When Detective Sienna asked her directly about the digoxin found in my food sample and in Dad's old medicine bottles, Mom said, Lewis was weak. He was going to ruin everything we built. Across the courtroom, Mom's lawyer scribbled furiously. He was good, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state. He'd been painting me as delusional, greedy, and jealous throughout the trial. Your father was indeed diagnosed with a heart condition, correct? He asked during cross-examination. Yes, after months of unexplained symptoms. And the diagnosing physician was Dr. James Pearson, a respected cardiologist? A doctor who was having an affair with my mother. The lawyer smiled condescendingly. That's quite an accusation, Ms. Woodward. Do you have proof of this alleged affair? The surveillance footage my father recorded shows them together on multiple occasions. It's been entered into evidence. Footage of 2 adults talking is hardly proof of an affair or a conspiracy. The footage also shows my mother adding an unidentified substance to my father's medication. He pivoted smoothly. You've had mental health challenges in the past, haven't you, Ms. Woodward? Anxiety, paranoia? Objection, the prosecutor called. Relevance. Goes to the witness's reliability, Your Honor, the defense countered. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, the judge warned. The defense lawyer smiled. Ms. Woodward, isn't it true that you've experienced paranoid thoughts before? That during college you believed someone was out to get you? I believed someone was following me during my sophomore year. Because someone was a stalker who was later arrested and convicted. His smile faltered slightly. And these recordings you claim your father made, convenient that they appeared just when you needed evidence, isn't it? My father hid them to protect them from my mother, just as he tried to protect me by sending me abroad after college. Or perhaps you created these recordings to secure the inheritance you felt entitled to? Before I could answer, the courtroom doors burst open. A disheveled Royce entered, walking with a cane, his face still bearing the scars of his ordeal. Despite not being scheduled to testify until the following day, the judge allowed him to take the stand after a brief recess. Royce's testimony was devastating. He described installing surveillance at Lewis's request, finding the footage after his death, and his years of watching Celeste. He detailed the attack that had left him for dead, identifying his assailant as a man he'd seen meeting with Celeste several times. She told me I knew too much, he said, his voice steady despite his obvious pain. That I had a choice, help her eliminate Rachel or join Lewis. The courtroom erupted at this, requiring the judge to call for order. When calm was restored, the prosecutor introduced her final evidence, a bombshell that silenced even the most skeptical observers. Your Honor, we've located Elizabeth Woodward. Gasps filled the courtroom. Mom's composure finally cracked, her face draining of color. Elizabeth Woodward, the defendant's first daughter, did not die of SIDS as reported. She was placed for adoption after surviving an apparent attempt on her life. The adoption was arranged secretly by Lewis Woodward to protect the child from her mother. Elizabeth, now Anna Keller, a 34-year-old teacher from Oregon, had been found through DNA genealogy websites. She'd never known she was adopted until investigators contacted her. The medical records from her infancy showed symptoms consistent with digoxin poisoning, the same substance used on Lewis and me. As this revelation settled over the courtroom, I removed the final piece of evidence from my pocket, my father's letter, which I'd been permitted to read aloud. If something happens to me, I read, my voice breaking, know that I tried to protect both my daughters. I couldn't save our family, but perhaps the truth can prevent more harm. Celeste's sickness is not one that can be cured, only contained. Be vigilant. Be safe. I love you always. As I finished reading, I looked directly at Mom. For the first time since the trial began, her mask completely dropped. The coldness in her eyes, the hatred, it was all there for everyone to see. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning their verdict, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and based on the new evidence about Elizabeth, attempted murder of a child. As the bailiff led her away, Mom turned to look at me one last time. No remorse, no shame, just a chilling promise of retribution in her eyes. Even in defeat, she remained dangerous. The judge's gavel fell. The nightmare was over, but its shadow would remain for a long time to come. 1 year later, I stood in the empty house on Oakwood Avenue for the last time. The rooms echoed with memories, both the fabricated ones from my childhood and the horrific revelations of recent months. Mom was serving 3 consecutive life sentences, with no possibility of parole. The evidence had been too overwhelming for even the best defense attorney to overcome. The fraud charges alone would have put her away for decades. The attempted murders sealed her fate. The house had been in limbo during the trial and appeals, but now it was officially mine. Mine to sell. Mine to leave behind. I walked through each room slowly, saying goodbye to the space, but not to the pain it represented. In the study, Dad's sanctuary, I ran my fingers over the bookshelves he'd built himself, the hidden panel that had concealed his desperate attempts to document the truth. Outside, Dad's garden had been partially restored. I'd hired a landscaper to recreate it from old photographs, a small tribute to the man who had tried to protect us all. The white roses bloomed brilliantly in the summer sun. I knelt beside them, digging one last time in the soft earth. This time, I wasn't searching, I was leaving something behind. A small pendant I'd had made, engraved with the words from the original one Dad had buried. For the one who knows. A reminder that the truth, however painful, had finally been unearthed. My weekly therapy sessions had become a lifeline over the past year. Dr. Marshall specialized in trauma and family betrayal, 2 areas in which I was now unwillingly expert. The anxiety may never completely disappear, she'd told me during our last session. That's normal after what you've experienced. The goal isn't to erase the past, but to prevent it from controlling your future. Easier said than done. I still check my food and drinks. Still recorded conversations when meeting new people. Still woke gasping from nightmares in which Mom stood over my bed, orange juice in hand, that same cold smile on her face. Trust came hard now. Except with Marnie. My half-sister had surprised me most of all. After her testimony helped convict our mother, she'd moved to Seattle, as far from our hometown as possible while staying on the same coast. She'd started fresh, new job, new friends, even a new therapy group specializing in children of sociopaths. We spoke weekly now. The shared trauma had forged a bond that our childhood rivalry had never allowed. Last month, she'd called with unexpected news. She was pregnant. I'm terrified, she'd admitted. What if I'm like her? What if it's genetic? It's not, I'd assured her. Mom chose to be who she was. We've chosen differently. I hoped I was right. Royce had found his own path toward healing. After recovering from his injuries, he'd launched a nonprofit in Dad's name, dedicated to helping victims of domestic manipulation and poisoning. He'd become an unexpected ally in the aftermath, handling press inquiries and fending off true crime enthusiasts who wanted interviews. "Your father saved my life," he told me after the trial. "Not just by giving me a job when I needed one, but by showing me what real integrity looks like. I owe him this." As I walked through the house one last time, I paused at the mailbox. It contained the usual assortment of junk, but also a familiar prison-issued envelope. Mom wrote me every month without fail. Each letter arrived with the same precise handwriting on the envelope, the same inmate number in the corner. I never opened them, but I kept them all locked in a fireproof safe in my apartment. Evidence, in case her words ever contained threats or admissions that might be needed later. Or perhaps I kept them as reminders of what could happen when malice disguised itself as love. In my kitchen that evening, I poured myself a glass of orange juice, something I'd avoided for months after the incident. I raised it in a solitary toast on the anniversary of Dad's death. "To truth," I whispered, "and to finally being free." The juice was sweet, with no metallic aftertaste. Because this time, I'd poured it myself. The house sold quickly, despite its notorious history. The new owners, a young couple with twin toddlers, planned to renovate extensively.
Good.
Let them create new memories, untainted by what had happened within those walls. Most of the estate, nearly $30 million after taxes, went to establishing a foundation. The Lewis Woodward Foundation would fund scholarships and mental health awareness programs, focusing particularly on children from homes with hidden abuse. The first recipient of the foundation's support was a research study examining the long-term effects of psychological manipulation on family systems. If we couldn't erase the past, at least we could use it to help others. I kept only enough money to buy a modest home and invest for retirement. Wealth had never been my goal, and now it carried too many associations with Mom's greed and Dad's death. Elizabeth, still Anna in her daily life, had declined involvement in the foundation but accepted my invitation to meet. We'd had coffee once, two strangers connected by blood and separated by circumstance. Her adoptive parents had given her a loving, normal childhood, everything Dad had hoped for when he arranged her escape. "Do you ever wonder who you would have been if you'd stayed?" I'd asked her. She'd considered this, her eyes, so much like Dad's, thoughtful. "Sometimes. But then I look at what happened to you, and I think Dad saved my life twice. Once as a baby and once by giving me a different path." She was right, of course. Dad had done his best to protect us both. He'd succeeded with her. With me, he'd tried, the overseas fellowship, the warning letter, the evidence he'd gathered. In the end, it had been enough, but just barely. As I drove away from the house on Oakwood Avenue for the final time, I heard Dad's voice in my memory, clear as if he were sitting beside me. "Don't ever drink what someone else pours unless you know their heart." Wise words, not just about poison juice, but about life itself. About the toxic people who could seem so normal on the surface. About the importance of seeing clearly, even when the truth hurts. I wouldn't drink blindly again, not beverages, not relationships, not easy explanations. The price of such trust had been too high. The road ahead stretched open and unknown. For the first time in years, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than threat. I turned up the radio and drove toward the future, leaving the house of secrets behind. Some ghosts would always follow me, but now, at least, I could name them. And in naming them, begin to loosen their hold. What would you do if the person who gave you life was plotting your death? If this story left you looking twice at your family photos, hit like and subscribe for more tales where trust becomes the ultimate luxury.